Right, hi, my name is Spencer Roth, and I'm presenting on sexual abuse in the church. So I'll just start kind of with some uh, top down, kind of countrywide stats, and just say that 1.8 million children in the United States alone have been sexually abused. And this is outside of the church. In a second, I'll zoom back into the church specifically. Um, the CDC estimates that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused before they turn 18. Of all instances of sexual abuse of a child, 69% of the cases reported to law enforcement happen inside the residence of the victim. So obviously that indicates a closeness to the victim, closeness between the victim and the accused, and usually that indicates obviously that they know each other. There's probably a certain level of trust. So to zoom into specifically the church, inside the church, as a result of some recent studies and stories, it seems that there's almost no difference in the rate of sexual abuse and the way that it does occur. So inside the church, it's almost as high, or in some studies, higher, and also happening the same way between someone who trusts this person with their child, or the child trusts this person. It's coming about in the exact same way. There's a recent article in the Houston Chronicle that kind of exposed a lot of this, specifically in the SBC. So a lot of these things will be specific to the SBC. So since 2008, more than 250 people charged with sexual assault have been employed by or volunteered at Southern Baptist churches in the United States. Most of those were not known, but that should have been tracked or come up with by some sort of background check. I know where I work, we work with a database resource called Safe Harbor, so that should flag any of that stuff. In the last 20 years, somewhere around 280 churches, church leaders and volunteers in the Southern Baptist Convention have faced sexual misconduct allegations. From those 280 leaders and volunteers, there are over 700 alleged victims, and many of those instances were mishandled by the church as a response, and you can read about those in the Houston Chronicle. I think it was a 3-part series. According to the Houston Chronicle article released, at least 35 church pastors, employees, and volunteers who exhibited predatory behavior were still able to find jobs at churches during the past 2 decades. So after they committed crimes, some of them, after they were accused, some of them, after there was confirmed predatory behavior, they were still able to go on and find jobs elsewhere, with people knowing, sometimes communicating about that, sometimes not, and that's part of the problem. To jump outside the SBC real quick, just for some other faith communities, a Mennonite publication surveyed ministers, and 76.5% of those surveyed said that they knew a clergy colleague who had been sexually involved with a member of their congregation. That's an incredibly high number. And then obviously the Roman Catholic Church has had a very public ongoing failure in this area as well for, it seems like, years and years. Abuse of power, failure to report from top down. And just in in conclusion, I want to read J.D. Greer's response to these things. I'll be done. J.D. Greer said in a blog post after all these things came to light, "It's time for pervasive change. God demands it. Survivors deserve it. We must change how we prepare before abuse and prevention, respond during disclosure, full cooperation with legal authorities, and act after instances of abuse and holistic care. There can be no ambiguity about the church's responsibility to protect the abused and be a safe place for the vulnerable. The safety of the victims matters more than the reputation of Southern Baptists."